Can you actually get seriously athletic without sprinting? Look, most coaches and trainers are going to tell you no, but 14 years of experience working with clients and athletes tells me there's a little more to this story than we're leading on. So I'm going to tell you the exact framework I've used to help hundreds go from stiff, awkward, and uncoordinated to smooth, fluid, and powerful in just 15 minutes. I've used this with everyone from athletes like professional BMX riders, skateboarders, and ultimate frisbee players to coaches, trainers, producers, and SWAT team members. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, so I get it. Chances are you're probably scratching your head wondering what a speed workout looks like without sprinting and thinking that literally makes no sense. And I get it. It sounds nuts. So before we get into the actual framework, let's first review the qualities that make up athleticism. When most people think athletic, they typically think three things: speed, strength, and power. But what about the more internal qualities that allow us to express athleticism? I'm talking things like rhythm, coordination, elasticity, stiffness, and yielding. And that is what a non-sprint speed workout is all about, honing in on the more minute qualities that make up speed, strength, and power. And to do that, we're going to perform 6 very distinct movements: skip, bounce, yield, exchange, hop, and twitch. So now that we know what a non-sprint speed workout is, let's get into what you really came here for: the framework. A non-sprint speed workout is composed of 2 parts, with each part being performed for 2 rounds. In part 1, we're going to focus on skipping, bouncing, and yielding. And in part 2, we're going to focus on exchanging, hopping, and twitching. So let's move on to part 1. The first movement we have up in part 1 is skipping. And I'm not trolling you when I say that. Skipping is one of my secret weapons to improving speed, because not only does it challenge our rhythm and coordination, but the double bounce helps to develop stiffness through the ankles, knees, and hips. I like to start clients and athletes off with just basic skipping variations like this and this before progressing to more rhythmic skips like this and this to further challenge both rhythm and coordination. Now, if we're doing basic skips, I'll usually prescribe something around 200 meters, which usually ends up being 0.12 miles. So if you don't have the space, you can use a curved treadmill. For more rhythmic skips, 10 to 20 yards depending on the space. Now, if you're doing this correctly, you're going to feel a noticeable burn in the glutes and maybe even the hip flexors. Our second movement in part 1 is going to be bouncing, or what is commonly referred to as a plyometric. With this, what we're working on is developing elasticity and stiffness, which is important because it teaches us to strike the ground quickly and bounce off it like a spring, which is a trait the fastest people in the world all share. Now, most people perform this wrong by stabbing the ground with their toes, which forces us to spend way more time on the ground. So instead, I want you to focus on 3 things: toes up, flat foot landing, soft knees and hips. By keeping the toes up and landing with a flat foot, we learn to more evenly distribute across a wider surface area while decreasing the time spent on the ground. Soft knees and hips allows us to put the muscles of the glutes, hamstrings, quads, and calves on stretch, leading to more elasticity and a more effortless bounce off the ground. I usually like to start with 20 to 30 reps, jumping about as high as your ankle, and from there, instead of increasing the reps over time, change the variation, instead moving laterally, backwards, alternating, or even modifying your stance to something more like a stagger. If you're doing this correctly, you'll notice the bounce begin to feel more effortless over time, as you no longer have to think about what's happening at your toes, knees, and hips. You can just do it without thinking. You ever heard someone tell you to absorb the ground or absorb force? Well, if you did that, all the force you develop would disappear into the air, and that's not exactly great for athleticism. And this is where the ability to yield comes in, which involves the soft landings that coaches and trainers typically refer to. Yielding is being able to sink and relax into the knees, hips, and ankles without falling apart. Now, this is important because it helps overcome something called inhibition. And inhibition is essentially a brake your nervous system throws on to prevent you from falling apart, which puts a ceiling on what you can do. For example, the engine might be capable of going 140 miles an hour, but inhibition is the nervous system throwing on the governor saying, yeah, we're only going 70 miles an hour, buddy. Reason being is that it just doesn't trust the brakes. Yielding is our way of letting the nervous system test and verify the brakes, which takes off the governor, raising your performance ceiling. When yielding, we want to think about melting into the ground. This is not about stiffness or the takeoff. This is all about relaxation and the landing. A simple progression is to start off with something 2-legged like a squat jack, progressing to a split stance like an alternating lunge jack, and finally ending with one leg variations like a swan hop. Perform this for 10 to 20 reps and think about trying to, again, sink as deep as you can in your knees, hips, and ankles. These are gonna burn the legs up, so if you notice yourself losing the technique, just dial the reps back. Okay, let's move on to part 2. The first movement up in part 2 of our non-sprint speed workout is an exchange, where we focus on a very rapid exchange of the limbs. With this, we're working on the coordination elements of athleticism and isolating how we attack the ground. This is a critical aspect of athleticism and speed because it teaches us to attack the space under our hips and initiate contact with the ground instead of waiting for the ground to hit us. With this, we're gonna follow a very simple progression. First, we're gonna start on the wall and move from a single to a double to a triple A switch, with each variation further challenging our coordination more than the last. If you want to go more in depth on this, I have an entire YouTube short linked in the description below. But essentially, I want you to set up at a 45-degree angle with our heel under mid-thigh and a straight line from our ear to our ankle. Ideally, our shin should be around parallel to that of our torso. From there, I want you to keep your hips pulled forward as you attack the space behind your hips. I should see your foot land in the same spot on the floor each time. Now, we're gonna move from the wall to standing, which adds an element of stability, and then we'll repeat that same progression, moving from single to double to a triple A switch. Then, this is where things get spicy. We're gonna further challenge both our rhythm and coordination with the addition of a hop. This is gonna allow us to refine stiffness through the ankles, knees, and hips. So let's review. Our progression is twofold. We're gonna go from a single to a double to a triple A switch, and then from the wall to standing to hopping. Now, as you get better, you're gonna notice that you're not only better able to maintain your posture, but you're also more able to rapidly and fluidly exchange your limbs. A good starting point is just 5 reps each side. We want to keep the volume lower to work on developing mechanics without fatigue impacting our ability to do so. Now, for our second exercise in part 2, we have a hop, which is just a bounce where we take off and land on the same leg. And since we're bouncing, we're working on the same qualities of elasticity and stiffness that we were developing in part 1. The same rules apply here in that we want to focus on 3 things: toes up, flat foot landing, soft knees and hips. Now, obviously, this is gonna be harder on one leg, which is why we prefaced it with a 2-leg variation in part 1, with the idea being that this is gonna prepare our tissues to better tolerate doing it on one leg. I want you to begin at around 20 reps on each side and progress by moving laterally, reverse, and alternating. Now, to round out part 2 and our entire non-sprint speed workout in general, we have convulsing, AKA twitch. Now, you're probably looking at these movements like, bruh, I am not doing that in public, and I won't deny that it's gonna get you a lot of looks in the gym, but I wouldn't include it if I didn't think it was gonna give you a huge bang for your buck. A critical component of speed and power is being able to quickly contract and relax our muscles. A relaxed muscle can contract faster than a tense muscle, so the more rapidly we're able to transition between contracting and relaxing, the higher our performance ceiling becomes. Now, the execution of this is honestly pretty simple. I want you to set a timer for 3 seconds and get as many reps as possible. You're probably wondering why the duration is so short, and we need to remember, the goal isn't to be tired, it's to be better. And this is not conditioning. If you've never done these, you're gonna quickly see that the coordination demands are unbelievably high, and you're probably gonna be unable to get 10 reps in 3 seconds without losing your technique. So until we can do that, for several different variations like straddle jumps, lateral jumps, and typewriter jumps, I like to keep the duration at 3 seconds. Over time, as we get better, meaning 10 plus reps in 3 seconds with perfect execution, we can increase the duration to 4 seconds and eventually cap it at 5 seconds. All right, so let's recap. In part 1, we have 2 rounds of 200 meters of skipping, or 10 to 20 reps, 20 to 30 bouncing, 10 to 20 yielding. In part 2, we have 2 rounds of 10 exchange, 5 left and 5 right, 20 hops, and 3 seconds twitch. Now, the question is, how often should you do this and when? We want to do this 2 to 4 times a week, rotating between 2 different workouts for 4 to 6 weeks. To get you started, scroll down to the description below to find 2 workouts. Now, when should you do this? Well, the great thing about this framework is it can act as both a standalone workout or as a warm-up, which is honestly how I tend to prescribe them. I most often prescribe them as a warm-up on full body days, which usually equates to 3 days a week, as a warm-up on lower body days, which ends up being 2 days a week, or if we really want to go all in, as a warm-up on upper days as well, which in a lower upper split equates to 4 days a week. Now, I understand it may seem a little weird to perform something like this on an upper body day, but I actually find that it's much more effective for a warm-up compared to the often, let's be honest, random assortment of exercise that most people do. It stimulates the nervous system, elevates the heart rate, and drives blood flow, which are all the hallmarks of a good warm-up. Other instance I tend to prescribe or do this is when traveling and access to equipment is limited, which makes a 15-minute non-sprint sprint workout highly effective when you don't need weights to train. Look, I want to be perfectly clear. This does not replace sprinting. It stimulates the more minute qualities that support sprinting, jumping, and athleticism in general. Now, whether you play sports or don't, sprint or not, I believe a non-sprint speed workout is for you if your goal is just general athleticism. Now, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to please press the thumbs up and subscribe, and thank you so much for watching.